when you look at this team, how would you handle the deadline in that? Would you buy, sell, or both?
Well, you alluded to the schedule. I think that's going to tell us a lot. You've got the Rays, the Cubs, the Phillies, and the Dodgers coming up. That gets you to July 27th. I think we'll have a lot clearer picture at the end of that stretch. But for me, if you're anywhere in contention and you have a chance to make the playoffs, you need to be a buyer. I think coming into this season, we heard a lot from Sam Kennedy and Craig Breslow about the Red Sox being aggressive and wanting to add to this team and wanting to end this playoff drought and, get back to where they feel like they should be. And it would be quite a contradiction if they were to be in the race like they are right now and go out and sell.
I'm just wondering, Sam Kennedy, Bill, has said a lot over the last 3 or 4 years, and a lot of it has been basically proven to be double talk and him using himself as a shield for ownership. Should Red Sox fans trust what he says?
I would try to pay it as little mind as I could because, as you mentioned, Sam is walking the company line. He has a very difficult job trying to defend John Henry, who largely has been out of the media for the last 5 or 6 years. And the Red Sox have operated in a way that is different from when they did win those 4 World Series championships. And Sam obviously can't acknowledge that publicly, but I think anyone who follows the team can see it. So if I was a fan, I would just watch the action on the field. I would appreciate the fact that they have acquired some good players and that this team does appear to be coming into something and that they do have the potential to add to it.
All right. Would you keep Jiren Durant on this team for the rest of this season?
I would say, guys, I'm not married to any particular player if I get the right offer. And in Jiren Durant's case, I don't know if there's an appetite there to extend him. He doesn't hit free agency until his 30s, so you don't necessarily need to extend him. If you do want to keep him, you could just go along year by year in arbitration. If you get a good offer for a starting pitcher, which I think is a serious area of need on this team, if you get a good offer for a starting pitcher, someone with multiple years of control, who you could slot in behind Garrett Crochet, either in the 2 or 3 spot, I think you'd have to listen. Because as you guys mentioned, outfield is their strength, both on the Major League roster and in the system, and you'd like to deal from a position of strength.
I think it's interesting that when you wrote about the 4 players that could determine what they do toward the end of the month here, Bill, that you didn't mention either Durant or a couple other players. You kind of focus in on some other guys that might have a lot to do with what the Red Sox ultimately end up doing here.
Well, the one thing that I was trying to get to, and there's been a lot of talk in recent years from the Sox about trying to be sustainable, right? About trying to do this for the long term. That was a word that we heard a lot out of Chaim Bloom and certainly out of Sam Kennedy during that time. And the 4 players that I highlighted, Ceddanne Rafaela, Trevor Story, Lucas Giolito, and Garrett Crochet, are their recent performances sustainable? If you believe that Trevor Story is going to be, even 80% of this player the rest of the season, or Rafaela is going to be 80% of this player the rest of the year, or Giolito is going to be, even 70% of the guy he's been in the last 6 starts, that means you've got 3 guys who can contribute to a playoff roster. And that would lead me to buy. If you don't believe in those guys, if you just think that the last 4 or 5 weeks have been hot stretches and that eventually they're going to revert to previous versions of themselves or level off, then you would sell. So I think there's going to be a lot of interesting internal discussions on Jersey Street in terms of what is real performance here and what is just maybe 2 or 3 good weeks.
Well, you got to ask the computer that. But I will. But here's the deal: is that how much is available at this trade deadline? With the 3rd wild card spot now, there's very few organizations, fan bases that are like, oh yeah. I mean, this is an obvious sell.
We went over them. There are like 6 teams in Major League Baseball total
6 to 8 teams that are like really that would be in a position where they're definitely dealing, and a couple of those rosters are pretty much devoid of talent. that means there's a lot of competition for very few players. How all in are you willing to go if you're the Red Sox? How much are you willing to compete for these guys?
Yeah, it's an excellent point. And that's why I think you see it left so late, all the way to the deadline now. You don't necessarily see early moves anymore, or even discussion of early moves. It really goes into last week now. I think, guys, this opens the door really for more realistic baseball trades. I don't know if, because of the market the way it is, I think you've got to look at teams that have weaknesses where you have a strength. If you have a team that needs outfielders and they have pitching, you would try to engage with them. I think, we talk about hockey trades all the time. Make a real hockey trade instead of just, trading off the roster for a draft pick or cap relief or whatever it may be. Make a real hockey trade. If you need a defenseman, and you have a surplus of forwards, trade a forward for a defenseman. In the Red Sox case, trade an outfielder for a pitcher. And I think that's why, so many people from the outside are putting the pieces together, and you hear Jiren Durant's name come up so often in trade rumors.
Do you believe this is a playoff team? You personally believe this is a playoff team, or like the season up until now, are they going to slide back?
Well, I have concerns about the starting pitching behind Crochet, and he himself is at 120 in the third innings. His career high is 146. Previously, that was last year when he tapered off in the second half. The Red Sox have a long-term decision to make about him. He is the ace here for multiple years, but do you want him to take some jump, to 200 innings, 215, 220 innings this year over the second half? That's an interesting debate physically for him. Behind him, Giolito's throwing the ball very well. Obviously, Brian Bayo was really sharp the other night. Is he really a guy who's going to pitch to a 3.27 ERA the rest of the way? Is he really the guy who they put so much stock in early, giving him a contract extension, buying out his arbitration years? Because beyond that, you're relying on Walker Buehler, Hunter Dobbins, Richard Fitz, Tanner Houck, if he can ever get it together in the minor leagues. I don't know if that's a rotation that can carry you over the last 2.5 months. I think that would necessitate a move.
And the other part of it. Okay, I was just going to say more to your Crochet point. Look what and you mentioned Houck. Look what happened to him this year. Houck blew through his career high in innings by about 80 last year, and look how he's been this season.
Yeah, it's difficult, and it's something that organizations don't want to do. They have a progression in terms of innings, whether it's from the minor leagues to the major leagues or within the major leagues. They only want guys to go up a certain number of years. So in Crochet's case, it'll be interesting to see how they handle him. Also in the bullpen guys, beyond Chapman, Greg Weissert has shown some signs of wear here. Justin Slayton's obviously still out. So I realistically think that if you're going to make a run at this, you need a 2 or 3 starter behind Crochet, and you need a guy who can pitch the 7th to the 8th inning. And, if you get out on the real market and you try to add those 2 pieces, they will be expensive.
For more Red Sox analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. And for all the latest from the Sports Hub, download the app at 985thesportshub.com.